Everyone is unique in one way or another. We can all do pretty incredible things if we put our minds to it. But then again, there are just some people that have done some pretty extreme and frankly bizarre things intentionally or by accident. Some of these things are so extreme that no one has been able to break these records for decades. And honestly, why would they want to? In today's video, join us as we explore 15 historical people who set incredible records. Dan Cleveland Sullivan, the human lightning rod. People have always said lightning never strikes the same place twice. Well, I guess they've never heard of a lightning rod. Still, the chances of getting a lightning strike at the same point more than once are pretty rare. But have you ever heard of a person getting hit with lightning not just once, but on several occasions? If you haven't, meet Roy Cleveland Sullivan, or as we like to call him, the human lightning rod. Roy was just an ordinary park ranger from West Virginia who gained worldwide notoriety by setting an extremely bizarre record. Roy claims to have been struck by lightning not just once, but on 7 different occasions. The odds of lightning striking a person is 1,000,000 to 1. The odds of lightning striking the very same person more than once is astronomically low. And Roy apparently beat all those odds. What appears to be more bizarre about Roy's extreme affinity for lightning strikes is that 6 out of the 7 lightning bolts struck him while he was working at his job in Shenandoah National Park. Although Roy holds the official record for the human surviving the most lightning strikes, there weren't actually any witnesses present to witness these lightning strikes. Also someone who has survived millions of bolts of lightning coursing through his body, Roy apparently had very little bruising and scarring after each event. The first lightning strike was sometime in 1942 when lightning struck his leg, causing him to lose an entire toenail on his foot. Between 1942 and 1977, Roy was struck on 6 different occasions, racking up a series of lasting injuries, some of which included losing both his eyebrows, his hair being set on fire, not once but twice, a nasty burn on his left shoulder, and burns on his ankle, chest, and stomach. According to Roy, the last lightning that struck him in 1977 happened while he was fishing at the nearby pond. The bolt of lightning hit him, causing his head to catch fire and causing burns on his chest. Philippe Petit. This next record was not set by accident, but after careful planning and strategic attention to put into it. The Frenchman Philippe Petit gained global notoriety in the 1970s when on the morning of August 7, 1974, he performed what was thought to be unthinkable and downright impossible. On his first visit to New York, Petit illegally constructed a stretch of wire between the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, which was still under construction at the time. Petit proceeded to walk the stretch of wire 1,300 feet above the ground, all while holding an 8-meter-long balancing pole. The daring artist performed his stunt for 45 minutes, suspended on the wire, before he was signaled down by deputies from the New York Police Department. During his interview, Petit revealed it took him 6 years of planning to carry out his elaborate scheme of walking between the Twin Towers. He had spent his entire fortune in preparation and had completed it with the help of a friend who smuggled in his equipment dressed as a construction worker. Surprisingly, the daring stunt at the World Trade Center wasn't the first time Philippe Petit had carried out such a trick. In 1971, he also illegally walked between the towers of Notre Dame as well as Sydney Harbor Bridge, successfully making him the very first man to carry out such daring stunts. Valentina Vasiljevs. The next record is most likely to remain unbroken for the foreseeable future, as it is truly the most unimaginable record in the world. Meet Valentina Vasiljevs, the farmer's wife in rural Russia who between the years of 1725 and 1765 gave birth to an incredible 69 children. Valentina holds the record for the world's most prolific mother, being pregnant more than 20 years at a time and enduring over 27 pregnancies. Valentina was able to carry 16 sets of twins, 7 triplets, and gave birth to not just 1 but 4 sets of quadruplets. Another fact that makes Valentine's record so daring was that the mortality rate during the 16th century was incredibly high, but she only lost 1 pair of twins while successfully raising the rest of her 67 children to adulthood. Valentina's husband also shares the record with her as he successfully fathered over 84 children from 2 wives, with his second wife enduring 8 different pregnancies and 18 births. News of the family's prolific nature was so impressive that the father was sent to meet Empress Catherine II at St. Petersburg. Longest time spent on a gurney in a hospital hallway. The Guinness Book of Records already has certain categories of records established in its books, but some records are specifically added due to some extraordinary people setting extraordinary records. Such was the case for Tony Collins, a 40-year-old man from Britain who on a single visit to the hospital reportedly spent over 77 consecutive hours laid on a gurney. Collins was a diabetic and on that occasion had caught a virus which resulted in him being sent to Princess Margaret Hospital in Swindon, England on February 24, 2001. On reaching the hospital, Collins was told there were no beds and that he would have to wait for another patient to be discharged before he could be placed in a room with a bed. He was placed on a gurney in the hospital hallway just outside her bathroom at 3 p.m. on Saturday the 24th, and it wasn't until 8:30 p.m. the following Tuesday before they finally found a vacant room and moved him to a hospital bed. According to the man himself, during his 77-hour stint in the gurney, he had no privacy, developed back pain, and had to rely on nurses to frequently bring him a drink of water, as there was simply nowhere to place a drinking jug. In another bizarre turn of events, when Guinness was investigating Collins's bizarre records, he fell ill again and was sent back to Princess Margaret Hospital. Similarly, he was again left on the gurney, this time for just under 60 hours, which may not be as long as the first time, but it's still an incredibly long wait in any situation. Collins blamed the terrible nature of England's NHS for the lack of proper care and inadequate medical facilities, and he predicted his record would be broken quite often as the state in the medical department was in complete disarray. Surprisingly, his predictions came to pass when in March of 2013, a 62-year-old man named Herbert Edwards was admitted to a different hospital in Swindon and reportedly had to wait on a gurney for a total of 144 hours before he was finally allocated to a hospital bed. However, Edwards did not break Collins' 77-hour record as he was kept in a designated area and not just a hallway. Robert Q. This is another record not set by accident, but as a result of gluttony and addiction. Robert Q set the world record for the heaviest person alive for the very first time. Weighing a staggering 948 pounds, Robert not only held the title of the heaviest human alive at the time, but also set another record as the human with the largest circumference. Due to his extreme weight, Robert's body size was incredibly large, and as a result, his body circumference was well over 280 centimeters, nearly 4 times the average human. Although he reportedly put in efforts to reduce his incredible weight, Robert did not live past the age of 32. But that record was broken by John Bower Minnock, who took it up a notch by weighing over 1,400 pounds at his peak, making him the heaviest human ever recorded. Due to his extreme weight, Robert developed several congenital problems, including heart and respiratory failure, which landed him in the hospital. Transporting him was extremely difficult, as it took over 13 firemen and a special stretcher to transport him from his home to the hospital, where he spent 28 months. He successfully lost over 1,000 pounds during his stay in the hospital, but that didn't seem to help his case, as he didn't live past his 42nd birthday. Charles Osborne. Charles Osborne set one of the most bizarre records in history, which is unlikely to be broken even today. Osborne was an ordinary farmer, and while going about his day in 1922, he had a pretty mundane fall that didn't result in any injuries, but it caused him to start hiccuping uncontrollably. This doesn't sound very unusual, as it might seem like a mild case of hiccups, which it would be if you didn't take into account that Osborne's hiccups didn't last for just a few minutes, but lasted for well over 68 consecutive years. Osborne was initially observed to hiccup nearly 40 times a minute, but over the years it seemed to level down to about 20 times a minute, but was still consistent and unyielding. According to some doctors who examined Osborne, it's believed that his fall might have caused some sort of neurological injury, or could have resulted in a rib fracture that might have damaged his diaphragm. Whatever the case may be, it resulted in his decades-long hiccup, and in total it estimated that Osborne hiccuped over 430 million times throughout his 97-year life. Osborne saw hundreds of doctors and received thousands of letters claiming to have cures for unyielding hiccups, but none of them ever proved effective. Surprisingly, a few months before his passing in 1991, the hiccups suddenly stopped, giving him a sense of freedom he hadn't felt in over 68 years. Although this might seem like an excruciating ordeal, Osborne always reiterated that he lived a happy life and full life, and the hiccups became something of a second nature to him until his passing. Zaro Aga, the oldest person to ever live. Setting the record for the oldest person to ever live is Turkish Zaro Aga, reportedly living to the ripe old age of 170. Aga's age remains controversial to this day, but the Turkish claim to have been born on February 16, 1764, and passed away in 1934. Well before he died in the early 90s, it was rumored to have been claimed that he was the oldest person in the world, so much so that the news of his staggering age was heard across the world. As a result, an investigative team from America flew to Turkey to investigate Aga's claims, and after his death, his remains were subjected to forensic analysis. Although Aga's exact age couldn't be confirmed, it was concluded that he lived well over 100 years, but it was still questionable if, in fact, he lived to be 170. The team concluded that regardless of the questionable nature of Aga's age, he quite possibly could have been the oldest person to ever live, and rightly so. Officially, the record of the oldest person to ever live goes to the French woman Jeannette Calment, who lived to the ripe age of 122 years. Although Zara Aga appears to have lived longer, his age was never truly confirmed, and his record remains unofficial. Jesse Owens. So far, there have been many unofficial records, but in the case of Jesse Owens, his records were set and confirmed but never publicly acknowledged. Jesse Owens was the African-American who set an amazing 5 world records in under 45 minutes. In May of 1935, Jesse Owens sprinted in the 100-meter track in just 10.3 seconds, and only 10 minutes later broke the long jump record of 8 meters and 13 inches. But that wasn't all. Just 20 minutes later, he ran the 200-meter track in under 20.3 seconds, and on the same day sprinted the 200-meter hurdles in just 22.6 seconds, winning gold in all 4 competitions. Because of his stellar sportsmanship and incredible ability, Owens was drafted to compete in the 1936 Olympic Games, which were held in Berlin. He went on to win 4 gold medals, but sadly, his accomplishments didn't receive much media attention. Because he was African American, you didn't receive much attention in the 1930s. Germany and the US was not much different either. Owens won the most gold records for the US at the 1936 Olympics, but was not even acknowledged by President Roosevelt, as he was afraid of losing voters for his upcoming presidential campaign. Owens's records were undefeated for almost 25 years, as they cemented his place not just in sports history but the African American movement in the United States. Rudolph Caracciola. Why some records are bizarre and weird, others are pretty straightforward and so daring that they go unbroken for decades. One such record was set by German driver Rudolph Caracciola, who became the best and fastest racing car legends in history. Competing in what is considered to be the precursor version of modern-day Formula One, Rudolph competed in the European Drivers' Championship, where he would go on to set an exceptional world record. Driving for Mercedes at the race, Rudolph went on to set an incredible speed record of 432 kilometers per hour, as well as setting an absolute record speed for a public road. He went on to set other racing records, but his public road record remained unbroken for almost 80 years, before it was finally broken by Nicholas Lillian in 2017 in a closed highway truck in the US. The most and biggest kidney stones, kidney stone. The next record was set unintentionally, and if given the chance, would never have been set in the first place. Dhanraj Wadley, a 45-year-old shop owner in India, had been experiencing over 6 months of abdominal pain. Following a visit to his doctor, it was determined that Wadley had an acute case of kidney stones. Following a 4-hour-long surgery, the doctor removed thousands of calcium and phosphate kidney stones ranging from 0.5 to 2.5 centimeters thick, all of which were extracted from Wadley's left kidney. Shocked at the sheer number of kidney stones extracted, the doctor and his team took over a month to count all the stones, all of which amounted to over 170,000 individual particles of kidney stones. Wadley had successfully beaten the previous world record of 14,000 stones removed from a single patient. Surprisingly, the record holder for the single largest kidney stone extraction from a single patient was also from India, named Vilas Guj. Guj was a constable from the Mumbai police and in February of 2014 had a kidney stone extracted from his left kidney, which measured over 13 centimeters across. This is astronomically huge, as the largest kidney stones typically don't measure more than 9 centimeters, which is the size of an average baseball. Tsutomu Yamagachi, the survivor. This next record is the one that the whole world hopes is never broken, as it was set under tragic circumstances. When the US dropped the first atomic bomb in Hiroshima in 1945, over 100,000 people lost their lives instantly, or as a result of radiation exposure. 2 days later, after Little Boy had devastated Hiroshima, a second bomb named Fat Boy was dropped on the town of Nagasaki, and the blast resulted in the death of over 50,000 people, most of which lost their lives almost instantly. But surprisingly, one man witnessed both cases and somehow survived unscathed. Tsutomu Yamagachi was present in Hiroshima on a business trip when the first bomb dropped and surprisingly survived. The very next day, he decided to return to his hometown of Nagasaki, only to witness the second bomb a day later. Fortunately, he survived both blasts, which most have stated makes him twice as unfortunate for the trauma he had witnessed, or twice as lucky for surviving when thousands others didn't. Somehow, he not only survived the bombing, but also survived the war, and as well as the century, living to the ripe old age of 93 before passing in 2010. Ashrita Furman, world's record-holding record holder. Some people set records, and then there's this guy whose life mission is to win as many records as he possibly can. Introducing Ashrita Furman, a man who isn't interested in breaking just a single record, but whose life mission is to bring as many records as he possibly can for as long as he can. He's the world's foremost record-breaking record breaker and has successfully broken over 600 records in 30 years. Although some of his records have been broken by others, he still remains his place as well as over 200 records currently to his name. Surprisingly, the Guinness Book of World Records created a specific category for Furman as the world's highest record breaker. Furman kickstarted his record-breaking career, breaking his very first record by completing 27,000 jumping jacks in under 6 hours and 45 minutes. He also went on to break records which included a balancing machine sore on his chin, the most arrows broken with the neck in 1 minute, and the most fire torches lit and extinguished in 1 minute, just to mention a few. Because he's so notorious for breaking records, it's highly unlikely that anyone will ever come close to breaking a number of records he has broken. Rumor has it that the Guinness Book of World Records has dedicated line of Furman whenever he calls to request spectators in his bid to break another record. Most bones broken. The next record was achieved by accident, but some would say it has been maintained as part of the holder's unyielding passion for a sport. Robert Craig Knievel is a ramp-to-ramp motorcycle daredevil and had successfully completed over 150 obstacles in his career. Over the course of his long career, he had major accidents and crashes in over 18 of his jumps, all of which resulted in more than 433 fractions spread across 35 bones. Craig currently holds the world record for the most fractions to the human body, some of which include fractures on his jaw, both collarbones, both arms and wrists, sternum, back, and every single rib. He also broke his ankle 5 times, crushed his tailbone, dislocated his left hip, and his pelvis was crushed and broken in 3 different places. Somehow it appears Craig is prone to accidents that result in fractures. One of the most prominent scratches occurred in February 1966 when he attempted to jump a speeding motorcycle and spread eagle. But he jumped too late and he was struck in the pelvis, sending him spinning over 45 feet in the air and landing face first on the ground. His worst crash, according to the man himself, occurred in December of 1967 when he attempted to ride over the fountains of Caesar's Palace in Los Angeles. Using his bike, he successfully made it over the fountain but came up short on the landing strip. This resulted in him tumbling over his motorcycle and skidding across the parking lot. He suffered multiple fractures on his ankle, pelvis, hips, and legs and had a massive concussion, which put him in a coma for a month. But surprisingly, his affinity for falling did not stop after his retirement, as he experienced a minor fall on a golf course that resulted in him needing a prosthetic hip. Towards the end of his life, he was heavily reliant on morphine to suppress his pain, well until he passed in November of 2007 from pulmonary fibrosis. Greatest distance thrown in a car accident. This is one record that no one would want to break, and given that it was set purely by accident. The unfortunate holder of this record goes to Matthew McKnight, and the worst day of his life led to his rise of fame. On October 26, 2001, Matthew was attempting to help victims of an accident along a highway east of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, when he was hit by a car going 70 miles per hour. Matthew was knocked 118 feet clear across the highway, which resulted in 2 broken and dislocated shoulders, a broken leg, a pelvis, and a fractured tailbone. He was remanded to the hospital for over 2 weeks and had to undergo 3 months of intense physical therapy before he was able to return to work. Although Matthew is a paramedic and volunteer fighter, he wasn't on duty the day he tried to help the accident victims, which placed him at the scene of his own accident. Matthew's attending physician, Dr. Eric Brader, submitted the paperwork to the Guinness Book of World Records, and Matthew himself wasn't aware the circumstances of his accident had broken a world record. Hardest to kill. This last record is so controversial and forbidden that even the Guinness Book of World Records doesn't have an official category for it to prevent people from completing it. The world record holder for the hardest person to kill goes to 50-year-old Irish immigrant Michael Malloy. Malloy was living in 1993 and was a retired fireman who was at the time a homeless alcoholic. 5 of his friends hatched a devious plan to place 3 different life insurance policies on him and then assassinate him to collect on the policies. One of the conspirators owned a bar and as a part of their plan gave money an unlimited tab with the hopes that he would drink himself to death. But although Malloy spent the entire day at the bar drinking himself to a stupor, he remained alive and kicking. Frustrated, they hatched a plan to replace Malloy's whiskey with antifreeze, and after drinking 6 shots of antifreeze, Malloy passed out cold on the bare floor, but was somehow still alive. An entire week went by, and they served Malloy nothing but antifreeze, and he was simply too drunk to notice a difference, but somehow remained alive. Seeing as how antifreeze was not doing the trick, they replaced it with turpentine, which is generally poisonous if consumed in excess quantities. But somehow that didn't do the trick either, and next day was straight up rat poison. They mixed the rat poison with sardines for Malloy. Instead of dying, he came back for seconds. Moving on to other tactics, on a cold New York night when temperatures were below -25 degrees Celsius, they left a drunken Malloy out in the snow and poured water on his bare chest hoping he'd freeze to death. That also didn't work, and so one of the conspirators moved on to brute force, ramming Malloy with his taxi and proceeding to drive over his body for good measure. That sent Malloy to the hospital, but unfortunately for them, he was discharged after 2 weeks, and his first stop was his friend's bar. They finally went to extreme measures by fixing a rubber hose in Malloy's mouth and connecting it to a gas outlet. It took over an hour before Malloy finally kicked the bucket. Unfortunately for the conspirators, they disagreed on how to collect the insurance money so loudly that the police were notified and they were arrested. They were tried and sentenced to death in the electric chair. They all died within seconds of being electrocuted.